All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you guys for joining. Over here, I have Jesse. Jesse is the founder of Canadian Islamic Wealth. He comes back from a very accomplished background. He is part of the finance background, and he's also deeply inside the Islamic finance world. He also runs a TikTok channel that is very well known. I love how he runs his TikTok channel. It's not just Islamic finance; it's also concepts of self development, growth, and opinions. He puts that personal touch to the videos that he makes. He also has a YouTube channel where he focuses on the different concepts of Islamic wealth and Islamic finance, which I'll link in the description below. You guys can check him out. Just to get started, Jesse, you want to quickly give us a quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Jesse Reitberger. I am a financial advisor and founder of a company called Canadian Islamic Wealth. And I'm sure those of you who've heard of me before know that we specialize in Islamic finance and investing. So, for Muslims in Canada, one of the biggest challenges is saving and investing for our future. And our goal at Canadian Islamic Wealth is to help you do that in a way that doesn't compromise on Islamic values. So just a little bit of my background. I am a convert, whatever you want to call it, to Islam. I converted to Islam back in 2014. And at the time I was working at a very large bank. And I was in this sort of investment services industry. But once I converted to Islam, I started to read up on Islamic finance and realized kind of everything I was doing was haram. So I started to study and I took some certification courses from the Ethic Institute and really learned stuff when it comes to Islamic finance. It took me probably 4 or 5 years to get out of the big corporate world and found my own business. In 2019, we founded Canadian Islamic Wealth specifically because we believe that, at the end of the day, any of these large companies can come along and cut Islamic finance at any point in time when they get a new change of leadership. But if we are founded on the beliefs and principles of Islamic finance, that's never going to change.
Amazing. Yes, so today the main conversation that we're going to be having is in regards to Islamic finance and how a world without riba and unethical finance would look like, and how Islamic finance is in essence, a savior or a safe haven, or just a haven for the finance world. So Jesse, to start off, what's your education and your experience say about interest and how interest has played a key role in developing some of the catastrophes around the world when you look at the different depressions, recessions, XYZ, also the imbalance within the wealth between the rich and the poor.
Yeah, so I mean, interest is one of those things that really can be attributed to a lot of the suffering that exists in the world. And I'm not going to pull any punches, right? There are historical examples that exist out there where interest has literally created poverty among some of the colonized nations and different things like that. And so if you want to look at it on a macro level, if you look at, we can look back even within the last 10 years, the major financial crisis that was going on in Greece, back in the early 2010s. I don't even remember the year, but I remember the fact that, people were worried that the Greek government was actually going to go into their bank accounts and take their money to pay off some of their debt and some of their loans and things like that. And it got to a point where, Greek debt interest rates were going up. It was to a point where they would never actually be able to repay that debt. And so like Germany and the European Union, had to downgrade certain aspects of their currencies and all this kind of stuff. So it caused a huge disaster. And I think things are a little bit better now. But for a couple of years there, the main headline out of Europe was what's going to happen to Greece because they were in so much debt. Now, this is a very recent issue on sort of a macro level, and there are other ones throughout history. If you look at Haiti, for example, I made a TikTok on this, when Haiti was first got their independence, they were worried about the French reconquering them and taking their independence away. And so they agreed to pay the French for lost money and different things like that. And there was a whole bunch of interest tacked onto it. And I don't believe that debt was either repaid, or I don't even think it was forgiven, but it wasn't repaid until like the mid to late 90s. And it led rise to people like Papa Doc Duvalier, who bankrupted the nation, different things like that. And to this day, Haiti is probably the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, and in like top 3 in the world. So we can see on a macro level how interest can just devastate a people and devastate economies. And then if we look at it on sort of a micro level, now to this day, we've got the largest amount of debt per capita right here in Canada, like consumer debt, right? More people than ever are living paycheck to paycheck. And this is because, you can get loans for really cheap, but you spend 10, 20, 30 years paying that off. And by the time that's up, you've paid triple what you would have ended up borrowing, right? Double, triple what you would have ended up borrowing.
Yeah.
So all these things are huge financial burdens on individuals. But then when we extrapolate and look at an even bigger level, we can see that there comes a point where things break, where things tip, where things kind of come crashing down. And we saw at the outset of the pandemic, because there is so much debt and because there is interest on that debt and it keeps growing and keeps accumulating, as soon as people lose their jobs, as soon as things
really
kind of close down, whatever the case may be, now this entire thing comes crashing down. And we saw the markets drop like 30%. And that was based on the fear that, okay, well, everything's being shut down. We're stopping everything. We don't know how bad this pandemic is going to be. And now that people are getting laid off, losing their jobs, they're not going to be able to repay this debt. And it's like this huge kind of snowball effect that will impact everything. Now with stimulus and companies sort of saying, okay, well, we'll let you defer payments until you kind of get back on your feet and all this kind of stuff. It wasn't a complete catastrophe, but if all these groups hadn't agreed to that, we would be in a much worse situation.
Yeah, and I mean, if you just look at the different interest rates and what's going on globally, for example, the interest rates, people may say, it's only 1%, 2%, it's not making a big deal in my life. There's two things to consider here. When it comes to global interest rates and how the International Monetary Fund works, is that it's not 1-2% for countries. It's like a lot more. I think it's somewhere around 12, 11, 13, 14%. Plus you're forgetting the concept of compounding. That is where the issue really starts coming in, is the concept of compounding. Because it may seem like 1 or 2 years not a big deal, but when you start thinking about compounding, that entire loan will double very, very quickly. So yeah, I agree with you.
Well, and this is the thing, right? So, and if we look at Canada's debt situation right now, like we've gone into huge amounts of debt. Like the Canadian debt is the highest it's ever been in history, from my understanding. And I think even before the pandemic hit, our debt was somewhere in the neighborhood of like, if every single Canadian would have to pay $10,000 out of their pocket to completely make us completely debt free.
Yeah.
Now find me 100, find me a room of 100 Canadians that have 10,000 to spare. Now, the grand majority of us are in debt and living paycheck to paycheck. So coming up with that 10,000. Now again, the government's not going to do this. Like their plan basically is that the Canadian economy is going to grow, and then eventually that growth will allow us to pay off our debt, different things like that. Like that is the strategy that they're hoping will work out. But this $10,000 a person is not going to remain $10,000 a person. It's probably going to be in 10 years' time 20%. And another thing we have to understand is every single country has a different credit rating, right? So the countries within the G7, right, get much cheaper rates on their bonds and different things like that than a place like Greece, for example, or somewhere like South Africa or whatever the case may be. And if you look at for investors who buy into the debt market, there are various credit ratings. So buying a Canada savings bond, which like this is interest, this is haram, right? So
Yeah.
we don't do that. But if you look at the credit market, buying a U.S. bond or a Canadian bond is going to be considerably cheaper for the people who are issuing that debt compared to a country like Greece or a country like South Africa, where instead of it costing them only 2, maybe 3%, it's going to cost them 9,
Yeah.
right? Because of the difference in credit worthiness.
Yeah, and so to kind of, I think a lot of people will have a little bit of a hard time understanding the macro aspects of it with the countries and the whole bonds and stuff. Let's bring it down to on a personal level for whoever hasn't studied economics and
Yeah.
and business. So just on a one-to-one level, where would you say this whole unethical finance, with not only interest but also unethical finance, plays an issue for on a one-on-one basis? Like me as a retail investor, I'm trading the stock market, I have a loan, why is there an issue for me?
Well, so I mean, so there's a couple things we need to keep in mind. So number one, any debt that you have is impacting your ability to save, invest in anything
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's not as though you can just pay it off like that, right? I mean, maybe you can, but the grand majority of people, they have their payments, um, by the time the debt is over, instead of actually having paid the full amount of the debt, if it's 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, you're looking at having paid three, four, $500,000,
Yeah.
as opposed to what the initial debt costs. Now, this isn't necessarily a terrible thing, but we just need to understand that because we live in a debt-based system, even the cost of inflation and the cost of interest, that is going to bring the prices of everything up.
Yeah.
And so, the reason you pay $2.50 for a bottle of Coke today compared to 10 years ago when it was $1.25, that's indirectly due to an interest-based system, right?
Yeah.
And even if you look at the various companies out there, like as an investor, if you're invested in stocks, companies with large amounts of debt get hit the hardest during global recessions and things like that. And that's because of the fact that at the end of the day, creditors want their payments, whether you can afford to pay it or not.
Yeah.
And so we saw, and this is one of the beauties of Islamic finance, and I'll probably end up going off on a tangent about.
That's okay. That's what the podcast is for.
we have a system where we want minimal to no debt for the halal stocks that we invest in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can see during times of recession, those tend to do better than your other types of stocks, and the reason for that. Your other types of investments. And the reason for that is because they have such low debt, they can afford to kind of just wait out the economic crisis, right? Whereas the companies that have high amounts of debt, their creditors are going to come knocking, whether they can afford to pay them or not.
Yeah.
So it'll cause a huge impact on their share prices and their overall value. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. So when I was looking into it and I was researching, there's this entire article on the concept of businesses flourish because of loans and XYZ. But then now when you look at it in certain situations like this, where you're going to have to pay interest, but there's no revenue coming in because, there's COVID happening or XYZ is happening. Really, you pretty much put your company in a position that you may have to close down now. So here and there, it may be fine to get a loan, but the issues comes with the interest. Now, this is where I'm going to jump in when it comes to the concept of loaning. So, fine, Jesse, I get it. Interest is a devil.
Yeah.
But I need a loan. What do I do as a Muslim? What do you want us to do?
Yeah. So again, I don't have all the answers because we do live in a credit and interest based system, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is there are situations that taking that interest based loan is acceptable for sure. What I would advise and what I would try to work out, and this may first of all, what we need to do as Muslims is we need to work together, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, And of course, this is easier said than done. Like, people who pray with their hands here, like this, whatever, right? Like that's enough to cause people to like want to punch each other in the face within our community at certain points in time, right?
Yeah.
So forget money, right? But
money's a touchy topic.
The whole point is get creative with potential solutions, right? So for the most part, I get a whole bunch of students asking me, well, how am I supposed to pay for school? Now, it's different in the US, so I'm not even gonna try to tackle that. But if you have a minimum wage job and you work 20 hours a week, like at McDonald's or Walmart or Costco or whatever the case may be, right? If you work 20 hours a week, you can pay for your university education while living at home.
Dirty right? Plug-in right here. I did my co-ops. I graduated with no loans.
Mashallah. Right? Like that's what we do. But we have a lot of, unfortunately, we have a lot of students who, and this may be your parents' fault a little bit, but take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah.
Your parents never made you have a job because they wanted you to get good marks.
Yeah.
That's okay, alhamdulillah. But if they can't afford to give you that leg up and set money aside for your education, then it's on you.
It's on you.
Now you can take a loan, and a lot of Canada student loans, they have it so that if you pay it back within the first 6 months of you graduating, you don't pay any interest. But good luck, right? Most, like, let's just say, for example, your tuition is $10,000 a year. Well, okay, at the end of a 4-year degree, that's $40,000.
Yeah.
In what universe are you going to be able to pay that back within 6 months?
Right? Dogecoin.
Yeah, well, maybe. Where there's a will, there's a way, of course.
Yeah. But I get what you're saying. And you're correct for that.
Whereas if you're working part-time, 20 hours a week, you're getting what, 12 grand a year, something like that. Like that pays your tuition, and then you've got a little bit of extra for spending, right?
Yeah.
So, I would just really, I would really try to find a way around that. Now, for those of you who say, well, what if I want to be a doctor? Again, all I can say to you is do your absolute best. But I have several clients who are doctors who graduated, they've got $200,000 of student debt, right? And, the reality is that the interest rate on that is about 4%. And when you factor in how much taxes they have to pay and all this other kind of stuff, like, it's going to take these people at least 5 to 7 years to completely pay off that debt. And that's assuming they're being aggressive about it, right?
Yeah.
Like if they're kind of going about it the way every medical student goes about it, like this could be a 20-year thing.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, and this is sort of another thing, right? It's like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Look to other things. Being a doctor is not the be all and end all of the universe. And the thing about it is, like, mashallah, if you want to be a doctor, I'm not saying not to do that, right? Like, if that really is something you want to, but a lot of Muslims I know want to be a doctor because it's good money.
You're going to have all the Arab and Desi parents after you now.
Yeah, I don't care. But they want to say because it's good money. You know what else has a lot of money in it that is super, like, there's nobody wants to do it, is trades.
Yes, like, in Canada especially.
If you become a plumber, if you become a welder, if you become an electrician, like, these are things that first of all, robots are decades away from being able to do any of those jobs.
Exactly.
Canadians, for the most part, don't want to do those jobs.
Yeah.
And you're going to be in a situation where, like, the whole boomer generation is trying to sell and get rid of all of their businesses, and they're the ones who have these businesses. So you may find yourself with an opportunity to take over a business. You may find yourself with the opportunity to start. Like, I know a guy who has a high school education who has a landscaping company that does $5 million a year in revenue in Calgary, right?
Subhanallah, yeah.
So like, being a doctor is not the be all and end all when it comes to making money. That's all I'm saying. Now, if that is your calling, if that's what you want to do, mashallah, go do that, right?
Yeah,
but if you don't know and you're like, okay, well, I just want to make a good living, trades are a legitimate way that you can make a good living. And if you start a business, like, I know guys here in Manitoba, they have, like, these small businesses in the middle of nowhere, right? All they do is they supply people with gravel. And their business is worth like $5 million, $10 million. Like, there's guys he has a pest control company.
You know where this comes from?
Super rich guy.
This is a cultural lag that we bring from back home. Because most of the Muslims in Canada are immigrants, right? And the thing is, back home, the wealth comes from jobs from the government and corporate roles, and being a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And this is why there's this whole
yeah,
push for it. But when you come to Canada, we need to start realizing that that's not how the wealth is managed here. You gotta once you come to a new country, you gotta restart understanding how that market works and how you can build in that. Like for example, my father, Masha, was in a decent position in the government in Pakistan. So when he found out that I got a job here in one of my corps in the government, he was like, "Amazing, stick to it." I said, "No." I'm like the jobs in the government in Canada are the most like laid back, and I'm way too ambitious for that. So
yeah,
I can't do all this stuff, and it's like, yes, it's kind of like structured, and it's gonna be good for the long run, but it's not like the best paying right off the bat. It's not the best promotional and growth and yourself intellectually learning. So
yeah,
unless if you're working for federal, but that's a whole different game, right? Um,
yeah,
but yeah, so there's that whole aspect. Now I want to push towards a little bit of the concept of um, how loans. Currently we live in a loan and an interest-based financial system. But
yeah,
when it was the times of the caliphs and then back in the day, before all this was pushed on us in the early 1900s, like pushed to the point that credit cards was just delivered to random people's houses in America to
yeah,
start using. That's how they promoted people to use. They kind of shoved it down our throat. Hey, use it, and because it was free, people thought it was free money. They started using it like crazy, and this is
yeah.
why we became into this corrupt system, which is trying to make an X amount of people more richer. But Kat, let's get back to the point. I'll even go on a tangent. Um, Before this, the loans were more, and even Islamic finance. How are loans managed, and why are they a better method of loans than the current system?
Yeah, so generally speaking, with when it comes to loans in Islamic finance, they're tied to an actual asset, right? So there's kind of there's kind of this there's collateral at the center of the transaction, right? So there's kind of two types of loans. One is, you simply lend someone money and hope and they'll repay you eventually, right?
Yeah,
Like you can do that, but it'll be a dollar for a dollar, and that'll be that,
yeah,
right? But then there are also loans of collateral, right? So if I give you, $500, for example, you'd be putting up something that you can live without for a few months until you pay me back that 500, right? So maybe you've got a watch, or maybe you've got some gold, or maybe you've got a computer, or whatever the case may be. And at the end of it, like you'd pay me back that, or you can set it up where I'm essentially buying your computer from you for $500, and then we make an agreement that you're going to buy it back for 520, or whatever the case may be. But
yeah,
at the center of the transaction is a physical asset, and the beauty of doing this is you are not a slave to me, right? At the end of
yeah.
the day, if you can't pay me back, I can take your computer and I can sell it and get my money
Oh, the
back,
concept of
right?
slavery with debt in the current state. Oh man. Okay, sorry to cut you off there, but people who have a mortgage, just think about like this. How worried and stressed are you on a monthly basis that you have to make that payment? Like
Exactly,
people who are
exactly.
not on that, they can, okay, my rental agreement finishes next month. I don't need to be in Canada because I can work from home. I'm gonna go to a third world country like, or not third, sorry, a much cheaper country like Malaysia. I can rent out an Airbnb for one third the price, and I can just relax there and work from home. The concept of working from home, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Kara, sorry, keep going.
No, well, that's just it, right? Is the whole idea of an Islamic lending system, and again, we've had these discussions on TikTok and various places. Like certainly because we live in a globalized interest-based system, it is a little bit more challenging to do things this way.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, the reality of the concept is that if I lend you, if we have a collateral at the center of the transaction, right, whether it's a computer or a car or whatever the case may be, if I can't get my money back, or you can't repay, or you say, you know what, yeah, I don't want to repay this money, I can come in and I can sell this thing and I can recoup my losses. And this is something that I think is hugely beneficial under any type of circumstance, right? Because if we look at if we look at sort of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu
so
alaihi wasallam, we get he has a hadith where he basically says, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, that after the major sins, the worst thing you can have is debt with nothing to repay it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you start off a transaction by putting up some type of collateral, that immediately gets rid of that issue, right? Because if I can't pay this, you're just going to sell this, you're going to recoup your money. But if I borrow, let's say $5,000, and I can never repay it, or I die and I have nothing with which to repay it, like that is a big issue. Like Prophet, peace be upon him, would not pray janazah on someone he knew had debt. Like that's
I mean,
so that is a serious thing, right?
Yeah, the aspect of debt and interest, like I've been pushing it, no matter what fatwa you read, you gotta read Surah Al-Baqarah, and when you read the ayat also about the concept of interest and how, like, it's like waging war against your Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Allah. Like, just comprehend that for a second. And even if you get into the physicalities of it, you're like, no, no. Can't even think about it.
You don't want to do it, like, both from a financial perspective, but also from a religious perspective, right? Like there is a reason that this is harped on throughout the Quran and Surah Al-Baqarah and tons of hadith that staying away from debt and staying away from riba, are things that we really need to focus on. So.
Yeah. Okay, so the other aspect about this, because I do a lot of research on this, and I'll link some of the researches in the description below. They're going to be similar ones to the one on my other video about riba. The concept of greed, how the incoming of riskless profits specifically from interest, not from other formats, but specifically from interest-based loans, has increased the concept of greed within society. What's your comments on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree. And if you look at how all of these loans are structured and how they're set up, like, there is basically no way that the bank loses money, right?
Yeah.
There's no way that anything that there's any level of risk. Like, first of all, if you've got a bad job or unpredictable income or anything like that, you're not getting a loan, period, right? But when you get to this stage where you can actually get a loan, they're looking into your tax returns, the stability of your income, the type of job you have, and then you've been given the loan. With that, they actually go out and they insure that loan. So if you don't pay it back, the insurance company is gonna pay them. And then on top of that, if you do pay it back, you're paying them that plus, probably by the end of the loan, an additional 7 to 10% at least.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no way in which the bank puts any kind of money at risk when it comes to these type of loans. And if you look at, first-time home buyers in Canada, for example, only have to put up a 5% down payment, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to be able to get a $300,000, $400,000 mortgage by putting up $15,000 to $20,000. But you have to pay something called CMHC, where basically if you default on that loan, the bank isn't out a huge amount of money. Plus, they're going to be able to take, foreclose on your house and sell that for a fraction of its price. So, like,
it's a lose situation.
There is no risk for them. Like, they paint the picture that they're at risk, but they're not at risk.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is it's a lose situation for yourself, but on the other side, for them, it's actually not a bad idea, because even if you do default and you go bankrupt, even if somebody at normal pace goes bankruptcy, they can sell that debt for to creditors, and I mean, in Canada it might not be as vicious, but in London, in America, there's documentaries of people getting like calls day and night being harassed by creditors about one repayment.
Like, in Canada we do have rules about that, so alhamdulillah for that. But like, in the US, like, your life is over. You might as well pack up your stuff and move. That's the level of.
Go to Malaysia or go to Pakistan. It's got some good food. But yeah, so that's another aspect. So okay, now before I jump into the second part, I like to always have some fun in between to show people, what, we Islamic finance people are not just boring. We have some fun stuff even within us. So I want to do a quick fire round and just ask you a few quick questions.